Good afternoon, 253 students. In keeping with my effort to make more spirited YouTube videos, even here in the quiet of my tiny office, I'm going to give it a shot with Chapter 11. And so I need to jump to the slide that is Chapter 11, which is the Radio Goes International chapter. And in this chapter, Wade Rowland tells us about how radio went international. And of course, at first it was just getting out of England and off the coast. He introduces the concept of a closed network, which will be very important once we start talking about the internet and other networks. But it was a big deal at the time of Marconi, because Marconi really enforced, until he had to give it up, the idea of a closed network where you had to buy the radio from Marconi, and you would communicate with Marconi-owned land stations, and the operator of your radio, which was on your ship, because that's basically that was his business, is ship-to-shore radio. And they called it at the time Marconiism. And there's kind of a reference to Windows and so on being a closed system as opposed to, say, Linux or something that is an open system. You could equally put in Apple operating system too as also a closed system. But so that's Marconiism. As you can imagine, countries of the world were not keen on that. So Marconi, although he was Italian ancestry, was living in England, and England was pretty dominant on the airwaves at this time, so both France and Germany and the United States, for that matter, were not happy that someone from another country was dominating it, or that you had to hire a British company to do radio for your ships. So they sort of essentially ganged up, and because radio waves travel across borders, they had a justification for this, and they had a thing called the International Radio Telegraph Conference, and that regulation continues to this day. It's now called the ITU, and you can actually go to the website the ITU, and through sort of various iterations, they continue to regulate the airwaves, and they got into telecommunications, and sort of branches of this are involved in the regulation of the internet. So it's actually a pretty significant development on sharing a shared resource and how to regulate it across borders. The other thing that's in this chapter is kind of introducing the non-professional people who were involved in creating the radio networks, or the radio, and these people were called hams, or kind of amateurs, and a lot of they got very involved. They built radios out of kits, and the connection here is that a lot of advances on web technology was also done by amateurs or people working at home, not by big companies. And one problems with the amateurs is that they interfered with the commercial radio stations. And I think I mentioned in class how early radios really operated on what's called a spark system. Like literally you were making sparks. And so it was really hard to separate, you know how you can tune up and down the radio frequencies now, and one radio station doesn't interfere with the other, but in those days interference was a huge problem. And hams were accused of either accurately or inaccurately of interfering with commercial radio, and so they were pushed out of frequencies and either pushed right off the air or made to operate in different frequencies. And this led to a lot of technical advances, because the hams had to make use of things that commercial radio stations thought were useless. And there's in the early days, both in the telegraph and the radio, remember in the early days of radio, people weren't talking, they were sending clicks just like they were on the telegraph. So abbreviations were huge, and so they had all kinds of like we have today with text messaging, lots of abbreviations that people used. And as I was mentioning, when people were actually, it was one thing to put radios on ships and send commercial messages, pretty boring, but when a ship sinks and people are saved, that was a big deal, and it led to not only popular appreciation for the value of radios, but actually regulations that came in place to force ship operators to buy and install radios and operate them 24 hours a day. Not just have the radio in the room, but be listening. Because actually, one of the sub stories of the Titanic is that there was somebody who was nearby, or another ship that was nearby, but the operator wasn't listening to the radio. And well, that's it for the International. I'll just put this on YouTube.